The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 13. Escaping from the Wreck. The Watchman. Sinking. Well, I catched my breath, and most fainted. Shut up on a wreck with such a gang as that. But it weren't no time to be sentimentering. We'd got to find that boat now. Had to have it for ourselves. So we went a-quaking and shaking down the starboard side. And slow work it was, too. Seemed a week before we got to the stern. No sign of a boat. Jim said he didn't believe he could go any further. So scared he hadn't hardly any strength left, he said. But I said, come on. If we get left on this wreck, we are in a fix, sure. So on we prowled again. We struck for the stern of the Texas, and found it, and then scrambled along forwards on the skylight, hanging on from shutter to shutter, for the edge of the skylight was in the water. When we got pretty close to the cross-hall door, there was a skiff, sure enough. I could just barely see her. I felt ever so thankful. In another second I would have been aboard of her, but just then the door opened. One of the men struck his head out only about a couple of foot from me, and I thought I was gone, but he jerked it in again, and says,
"Heave that blame lantern out of sight, Bill."
He flung a bag of something into the boat, and then got in himself and sat down. It was Packard. Then Bill he come out and got in. Packard says, in a low voice,
"All ready. Shove off."
I couldn't hardly hang on to the shutters, I was so weak. But Bill says,
Hold on. Did you go through him?
"No. Didn't you?"
No. So he's got his share of the cash yet.
"Well, then, come along. No use to take truck and leave money."
Say, won't he suspicion what we're up to?
"Maybe he won't, but we got to have it anyway. Come along."
So they got out and went in. The door slammed, too, because it was on the careen side, and in a half a second I was in the boat, and Jim come tumbling after me. I out with my knife and cut the rope, and away we went. We didn't touch an oar, and we didn't speak no whisper, nor hardly even breathe. We went gliding swift along, dead silent, past the tip of the paddle box, and past the stern. Then, in a second or two more, we was 100 yards below the wreck, and the darkness soaked her up, every last sign of her, and we was safe, and knowed it. When we was 300 or 400 yards downstream, we seen the lantern show like a little spark at the Texas door for a second, and we knowed by that the rascals had missed their boat, and was beginning to understand that they was in just as much trouble now as Jim Turner was. Then Jim manned the oars, and we took out after our raft. Now was the first time that I begun to worry about the men. I reckon I hadn't had time to before. I begun to think how dreadful it was, even for murderers, to be in such a fix. I says to myself, there ain't no tellin' but I might come to be a murderer myself yet, and then how would I like it? So says I to Jim, the first light we see, we'll land 100 yards below it or above it, in a place where it's a good hiding place for you and the skiff, and then I'll go and fix up some kind of a yarn, and get somebody to go for that gang, and get them out of their scrape, so they can be hung when their time comes. But that idea was a failure, for pretty soon it begun to storm again, and this time worse than ever. The rain poured down, and never a light showed. Everybody in bed, I reckon. We boomed along down the river, watching for lights and watching for our raft. After a long time the rain lit up, but the clouds stayed, and the lightning kept whimpering, and by a flash showed us a black thing ahead, floating, and we made for it. It was a raft, and mighty glad was we to get aboard of it again. We seen a light now away down to the right, on shore. So I said I would go for it. The skiff was half full of plunder, which that gang had stole there on the wreck. We hustled it on to the raft in a pile, and I told Jim to float along down, and show a light when he judged he had gone about 2 mile, and keep it burning till I come. Then I manned my oars, and shoved for the light. As I got down towards it, 3 or 4 more showed, up on a hillside. It was a village. I closed in above the shorelight, and laid on my oars and floated. As I went by, I see it was a lantern hanging on the jackstaff of a double-hull ferry-boat. I skimmed around for the watchman, a-wonderin' whereabouts he slept, and by I found him roostin' on the bitts forward, and his head down between his knees. I gave his shoulder 2 or 3 little shoves, and began to cry. He stirred up in a kind of a startleish way, but when he sees it was only me, he took a good gaping stretch, and then he says,
"Hello, what's up? Don't cry, bub. What's the trouble?"
I says, "Pap and Mam and Sis and—" Then I broke down. He says,
"Oh, dang it now, don't take on so. We all has to have our troubles, and this'n'll come out all right. What's the matter with him?"
There, are you the watchman of the boat?"
"Yes,
he says, kind of pretty well satisfied like.
I'm the captain and the owner and the mate and the pilot and watchman and head deck hand. And sometimes I'm the freight and passengers. I ain't as rich as old Jim Hornback, and I can't be so blame generous and good to Tom, Dick, and Harry as what he is, and slam around money the way he does. But I've told him a many a time I wouldn't trade places with him, for, says I, a sailor's life's the life for me, and I'm durned if I'd live 2 mile out of town where there ain't nothing ever goin' on, not for all his spondulicks and as much more on top of it, says I."
I broke in and says, "They're in an awful peck of trouble, and—"
"Who is?"
"Why, Pap and Mam and Sis and Miss Hooker. And if you take your ferry boat and go up there—"
"Up where? Where are they?"
"On the wreck."
"What wreck?"
"Why, there ain't but one."
"What, you don't mean the Walter Scott?"
"Yes."
"Good land! What are they doing there, for gracious sakes?"
"Well, they didn't go there a purpose."
"I bet they didn't. Why, great goodness, there ain't no chance for 'em if they don't get off mighty quick. Why, how in the nation did they ever get into such a scrape?"
"Easy enough. Miss Hooker was a-visiting up there to the town."
"Yes, Booth's Landing. Go on."
"She was a-visiting there at Booth's Landing, and just in the edge of the evening she started over with her nigger woman in the horse ferry to stay all night at her friend's house. Miss What you may call her, I disremember her name, and they lost their steering oar, and swung around and went a-floating down, stern first, about 2 mile, and settle-bagsed on the wreck, and the ferryman, and the nigger woman, and the horses was all lost. But Miss Hooker, she made a grab, and got aboard the wreck. Well, about an hour after dark, we come along down in our trading scow, and it was so dark we didn't notice the wreck till we was right on it. And so we saddle-bagsed, but all of us was saved but Bill Wimple, and oh, he was the best creature. I most wished it had been me, I do."
"By George, it's the beatenest thing I ever struck. And then what did you all do?"
"Well, we hollered and took on, but it's so wide there we couldn't make nobody hear. So Pap said somebody got to get ashore and get help somehow. I was the only one that could swim, so I made a dash for it. And Miss Hooker, she said if I didn't strike help sooner, come here and hunt up her uncle, and he'd fix the thing. I made the land about a mile below, and been fooling along ever since, trying to get people to do something, but they said, 'What, in such a night, in such a current? There ain't no sense in it. Go for the steam ferry. Now if you'll go and—'
"By Jackson, I'd like to, and blame it, I don't know but I will. But who in the dingnation's a-going to pay for it? Do you reckon your papa—"
Why, that's all right. Miss Hooker, she told me, particular, that her Uncle Hornback—"
"Great guns! Is he her uncle? Looky here. You break for that light over yonder way, and turn out west when you get there, and about a quarter of a mile out you'll come to the tavern. Tell him to dart you out to Jim Hornback's, and he'll foot the bill. And don't you fool around any, because he'll want to know the news. Tell him I'll have his niece all safe before he can get to town. Hump yourself now. I'm a-going up around the corner here to roust out my engineer."
I struck for the light, but as soon as he turned the corner, I went back and got into my skiff and bailed her out, and then pulled up shore in the easy water about 600 yards, and tucked myself in among some wood boats, for I couldn't rest easy till I could see the ferry boat start. But take it all around, I was feeling rather comfortable on accounts of taking all this trouble for that gang, for not many would 'a' done it. I wish the widow knowed about it. I judge she would be proud of me for helping these rapscallions, because rapscallions and deadbeats is the kind the widow and good people takes the most interest in. Well, before long, here comes the wreck, dim and dusty, sliding along down. A kind of cold shiver went through me, and then I struck out for her. She was very deep, and I see in a minute there weren't much chance for anybody being alive in her. I pulled all around her, and hollered a little, but there wasn't any answer, all dead still. I felt a little bit heavy-hearted about the gang, but not much, for I reckoned if they could stand it, I could. Then there comes the ferry boat, so I shoved for the middle of the river on a long downstream slant, and when I judged I was out of eye reach, I laid on my oars, and looked back and see her go, and smell around the wreck for Miss Hooker's remainders, because the captain would know her Uncle Hornback would want them. And then pretty soon the ferry boat give it up and went for the shore, and I laid into my work and went a-booming down the river. It did seem a powerful long time before Jim's light showed up, and when it did show it looked like it was 1,000 miles off. By the time I got there, the sky was beginning to get a little gray in the east, so we struck for an island, and hid the raft, and sunk the skiff, and turned in, and slept like dead people. End of Chapter 13. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 14. A General Good Time. The Harem. French. By and by, when we got up, we turned over the truck the gang had stole off of the wreck, and found boots and blankets and clothes, and all sorts of other things, and a lot of books, and a spyglass, and 3 boxes of cigars. We hadn't ever been this rich before in neither of our lives. The cigars was prime. We laid off all the afternoon in the woods talking, and me reading the books, and having a general good time. I told Jim all about what happened inside the wreck and at the ferry boat, and I said these kinds of things was adventures, but he said he didn't want no more adventures. He said that when I went in the Texas and he crawled back to get on the raft and found her gone, he nearly died, because he judged it was all up to him anyway, it could be fixed. For if he didn't get saved, he would get drownded, and if he did get saved, whoever saved him would send him back home, so as to get the reward, and then Miss Watson would sell him south, sure. Well, she was right. He was most always right. He had an uncommon level head for a nigger. I read considerable to Jim about kings and dukes and earls and such, and how gaudy they dressed, and how much style they put on, and called each other your majesty, and your grace, and your lordship, and so on, instead of mister, and Jim's eyes bugged out, and he was interested. He says,
"I didn't know dey was so many on 'em. I hain't hearn 'bout none on 'em, scarcely, but old King Solomon, unless you counts dem kings dat's in a pack o' kyards. How much do a king git?"
Get? I says. Why, they get $1,000 a month if they want it. They can have just as much as they want. Everything belongs to them.
Ain't that gay? And what they got to do, Huck?
They don't do nothing. Why, how you talk. They just sit around.
No, is that so?
Of course it is. They just sit around, except maybe when there's a war. Then they go to the war. But other times, they just lazy around, or just talking. Just talking and Shh! Do you hear the noise? We skipped out and looked, but it weren't nothing but the flutter of a steamboat's wheel away down, coming around the point. So we come back. Yes, says I, and other times, when things is dull, they fuss with the Parliament, and if everybody don't go just so, he whacks their heads off, but mostly they hang around the harem.
Round the which?
Harem.
What's the harem?
The place where he keeps his wives. Don't you know about the harem? Solomon had one. He had about 1,000,000 wives.
Why, yes, that's so. I done forgot it. A harem's a boarding house, I reckon. Most likely they has rackety times in the nursery. And I reckon the wives quarrels considerable, and that creased the racket. Yet they say Solomon the wisest man that ever live. I don't take no stock in that. Because why would a wise man want to live in the midst of such a blim-blamming all the time? No, 'deed he wouldn't. A wise man had taken build a biller factory, and then he could shut down the biller factory when he wants to rest.
Well, but he was the wisest man, anyway, because the widow, she told me so, her own self.
I don't care what the widder say. He warn't no wise man nother. He had some of the dad-fetchedest ways I ever see. Does you know 'bout that child that he is going to chop in two?
Yes, the widow told me all about it.
Well then, warn't that the beatin'est notion in the world? You just take and look at it a minute. Dar's the stump, dar. That's one of the women. Here's you. That's the yother one. I's Solomon, and this yere dollar bill's the child. Before'n you's claim it, what does I do? Does I shin around among the neighbors and find out which un of you the bill do belong to, and hand it over to the right one, all safe and sound, the way that anybody that had any gumption would? No, I take and whack the bill in two, and give half on it to you, and the other half to the other woman. That's the way Solomon was going to do it with the child. Now I want to ask you, what's the use of that half a bill? Can't buy nothing with it. And what use is half a child? I wouldn't give a dern for 1,000,000 on 'em.
But hang it, Jim, you've clean missed the point. Blame it, you've missed it 1,000 mile.
Who, me? Go along, don't talk to me about yo' pence. I reckon I knows sense when I sees it, and they ain't no sense in such doing as that. Disputed wa'n't 'bout a half a child. Dispute was 'bout a whole child, and the man that think he can settle a 'spute 'bout a whole child with a half a child don't know enough to come in out of the rain. Don't talk to me 'bout Solomon, Huck. I knows him by the back.
But I tell you, you don't get the point.
Blame the point. I reckon I knows what I knows, and mind you, the real p'int is down furder. It's down deeper. It lays in the way Solomon was raised. You take a man that's got only 1 or 2 children. Is that man going to be wasteful of children? No, he ain't. He can't afford it. He knows how to value 'em. But you take a man that's got about 5 million children running around the house, and it's different. He as soon chop a child in two as a cat. There's plenty more. A child or two, more or less, want no consequence to Solomon. Dad fetch him.
I never see such a nigger. If he got a notion in his head once, there weren't no getting it out again. He was the most down on Solomon of any nigger I ever see, so I went to talking about other kings, and let Solomon slide. I told him about Louis XVI that got his head cut off in France a long time ago, and about his little boy, the Dolphin, that would have been a king, but they took him and shut him up in jail, and some say he died there.
Poor little chap.
But some says he got out and got away, and come to America.
That's good, but he'll be pooty lonesome. There ain't no kings here, is there, Huck?
No.
Then he can't get no situation. What he going to do?
Well, I don't know. Some of them gets on the police, and some of them learns people how to talk French.
Why, Huck, don't the French people talk the same way we does?
No, Jim, you couldn't understand a word they said. Not a single word.
Well, now, I be ding busted. How did that come?
I don't know, but it's so. I got some of their jabber out of a book. Suppose a man was to come to you and say, Parlez-vous français? What would you think?
I wouldn't think nothing. I'd take and bust him over the head. That is, if he want white. I wouldn't low no nigger to call me that.
Shucks, it ain't calling you anything. It's only saying, do you know how to talk French?
Well, then why couldn't he say it?
Why, he is a saying it. It's a Frenchman's way of saying it.
Well, it's a blame ridiculous way, and I don't want to hear no more about it. There ain't no sense in it.
Looky here, Jim. Does a cat talk like we do?
No, a cat don't.
Well, does a cow?
No, a cow don't nother.
Does a cat talk like a cow, or a cow talk like a cat?
No, they don't.
It's natural and right for 'em to talk different from each other, ain't it?
Course.
And ain't it natural and right for a cat and a cow to talk different from us?
Why, most surely it is.
Well then, why ain't it natural and right for a Frenchman to talk different from us? You answer me that.
Is a cat a man, Huck?
No.
Well, then, there ain't no sense in a cat talking like a man. Is a cow a man, or is a cow a cat?
No. She ain't either of 'em.
Well, then, she ain't got no business to talk like either one or the other of 'em. Is a Frenchman a man?
Yes.
Well, then, dad blame it, why don't he talk like a man? You answer me that.
I see it weren't no use wasting words. You can't learn a nigger to argue. So I quit. End of chapter 14. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 15. Huck loses the raft. In the fog. Huck finds the raft. Trash. We judged that 3 nights more would fetch us to Cairo, at the bottom of Illinois, where the Ohio River comes in, and that was what we was after. We would sail the raft and get on a steamboat, and go way up the Ohio, amongst the free states, and then to be out of trouble. Well, the second night a fog begun to come on, and we made for a towhead to tie to, for it wouldn't do to try to run in a fog. But when I paddled ahead in the canoe with the line to make fast, there weren't anything but little saplings to tie to. I passed the line around one of them, right on the edge of the cut bank, but there was a stiff current, and the raft came booming down so lively she tore it out by the roots, and away she went. I see the fog closing down, and it made me so sick and scared I couldn't budge for most half a minute, it seemed to me, and then there weren't no raft in sight, You couldn't see 20 yards. I jumped into the canoe and run back to the stern and grabbed the paddle and set her back a stroke, but she didn't come. I was in such a hurry I hadn't untied her. I got up and tried to untie her, but I was so excited my hands shook so I couldn't hardly do anything with them. As soon as I got started I took out after the raft, hot and heavy, right down the towhead. That was all right, as far as it went, but the towhead weren't 60 yards long, and the minute I flew by the foot of it I shot out into the solid white fog, and hadn't no more idea which way I was going than a dead man. Thinks I, it wouldn't do to paddle. First I know, I'll run into the bank or a towhead or something. I got to sit still and float, and yet it's mighty fidgety business to have to hold your hand still at such a time. I whooped and listened. Away down there somewheres I hears a small whoop, and up comes my spirits. I went tearing after it, listening sharp to hear it again. The next time it come, I see I weren't heading for it, but heading away to the right of it, and the next time I was heading away to the left of it, and not gaining on it much either, for I was flying around this way and that and t'other, but it was going straight ahead all the time. I did wish the fool would think to beat a tin pan, and beat it all the time, but he never did, and it was the still places between the whoops that was making the trouble for me. Well, I fought along, and directly I hears the whoop behind me. I was tangled good now. That was somebody else's whoop, or else I was turned around. I throwed the paddle down. I heard the whoop again. It was behind me yet, but in a different place. It kept coming, and kept changing its place, and I kept answering, till by and by it was in front of me again, and I knowed the current had swung the canoe's head downstream, and I was all right if that was Jim, and not some other raftsman hollerin'. I couldn't tell nothing about voices in a fog, for nothing didn't look natural nor sound natural in a fog. The whooping went on, and in about a minute I come a boomin' down on a cut bank with smoky ghosts of big trees on it, and the current throwed me off to the left and shot by, amongst a lot of snags that fairly roared. The current was tearing by them so swift. In another second or two it was solid white and still again. I sat perfectly still then, listening to my heart thump, and I reckon I didn't draw a breath while it thumped 100. I just give up then. I knowed what the matter was. That cut bank was an island, and Jim had gone down to other side of it. It weren't no towhead that you could float by in 10 minutes. It had the big timber of a regular island. It might be 5 or 6 miles long, and more than a half a mile wide. I kept quiet, with my ears cocked, about 15 minutes, I reckon. I was floating along, of course, 4 or 5 miles an hour, but you didn't ever think of that. No, you feel like you are laying dead still on the water, and if a little glimpse of a snag slips by you, don't think to yourself how fast you're going, but you catch your breath and think, my, how that snag's tearing along. If you think it ain't dismal and lonesome out in a fog that way by yourself in the night, you try it once, you'll see. Next, for about an half an hour, I whoops now and then. At last I hears the answer a long ways off, and tries to follow it, but I couldn't do it. And directly I judged I got into a nest of towheads, for I had little dim glimpses of them on both sides of me, sometimes just a narrow channel between, and some that I couldn't see. I knowed was there, because I hear the wash of the current against the old dead brush and trash that hung over the banks. Well, I weren't long losing the whoops down amongst the towheads, and I only tried to chase them a little while, anyway, because it was worse than chasing a jack-o'-lantern. You never knowed a sound dodge around so, and swamp places so quick and so much. I had to claw away from the bank pretty lively 4 or 5 times, to keep from knocking the islands out of the river, and so I judged the raft must be butting into the bank every now and then, or else it would get further ahead and clear out of hearing. It was floating a little faster than what I was. Well, I seemed to be in the open river again by and by, but I couldn't hear no sign of a whoop nowheres. I reckon Jim had fetched up on a snag, maybe, and it was all up with him. I was good and tired, so I laid down in the canoe and said I wouldn't bother no more. I didn't want to go to sleep, of course, but I was so sleepy I couldn't help it, so I thought I would take just one little cat nap. But I reckon it was more than a cat nap, for when I waked up, the stars was shining bright, the fog was all gone, and I was spinning down a big bend stern first. First, I didn't know where I was. I thought I was dreaming, and when things began to come back to me, they seemed to come up dim out of last week. It was a monstrous big river here, with the tallest and the thickest kind of timber on both banks, just a solid wall, as well as I could see by the stars. I looked away downstream and seen a black speck on the water. I took after it, but when I got to it, it weren't nothing but a couple of saw logs made fast together. Then I see another speck, and chased that, then another, and this time I was right. It was the raft. When I got to it, Jim was settin' there with his head down between his knees asleep, with his right arm hanging over the steering oar. The other oar was smashed off, and the raft was littered up with leaves and branches and dirt. So she'd had a rough time. I made fast and laid down under Jim's nose on the raft, and began to gap, and stretched my fists out against him, and says, "Hello, Jim, have I been asleep? Why didn't you stir me up?"
Goodness gracious, is that you, Huck? And you ain't dead. You ain't drowned. You's back again. Oh, it's too good for true, honey. It's too good for true. Let me look at you, child. Let me feel of you. No, you ain't dead. You's back again, live and sound, just the same old Huck. The same old Huck. Thanks to goodness.
"What's the matter with you, Jim? You been a-drinking?"
Drinking? Has I been a-drinking? Has I had a chance to be a-drinking?
"Well, then, what makes you talk so wild?"
How does I talk wild?
"How? Why, hain't you been talking about my coming back, and all that stuff, as if I had been gone away?"
Huck Finn, you look me in the eye. Look me in the eye. Ain't you been gone away?
"Gone away? Why, what in the nation do you mean? I hain't been gone anywheres. Where would I go to?"
Well, looky here, boss. Dey's something wrong, there is. Is I me, or who is I? Is I here, or whar is I? Now that's what I wants to know.
"Well, I think you're here, plain enough, but I think you're a tangle-headed old fool, Jim."
I is I? Well, you answer me this. Didn't you tote out the line in the canoe for to make fast to the towhead?
"No, I didn't. What towhead? I hain't seen no towhead."
You hain't seen no towhead. Looky here. Didn't the line pull loose and the raft go a-hummin' down the river and leave you and the canoe behind in the fog?
"What fog?"
Why, the fog that's been around all night. And didn't you whoop and didn't I whoop till we got mixed up in the islands, and one of us got lost and t'other one was just as good as lost, case he didn't know whar he was, and didn't I bust up again a lot of them islands and have a turrible time and most get drownded? Now ain't that so, boss? Ain't it so? You answer me that.
"Well, this is too many for me, Jim. I hain't seen no fog, nor no islands, nor troubles, nor nothin'. I been sittin' here talking with you all night till you went to sleep, about 10 minutes ago, and I reckon I done the same. You couldn't a got drunk in that time, so o' course you've been dreamin'."
Dad fetch it, how is I going to dream all that in 10 minutes?
"Well, hang it all, you did dream it, because there didn't any of it happen."
But Huck, it's all just as plain to me as...
It don't make no difference how plain it is. There ain't nothing in it. I know, because I've been here all the time. Jim didn't say nothing for about 5 minutes, but sit there studying over it. Then he says,
Well, then I reckon I did dream it, Huck. But dog my cats if it ain't the powerfulest dream I ever see. And I hain't ever had no dream before that's tired me like this one.
oh well, that's all right, because a dream does tire a body like everything sometimes. But this one was a staving dream. Tell me all about it, Jim. So Jim went to work and told me the whole thing right through, just as it happened, only he painted it up considerable. Then he said he must start in and
Interpret.
it, because it was sent for a warning. He said the first towhead stood for a man that would try to do us some good, but the current was another man that would get us away from him. The whoops was warnin's that would come to us every now and then, and if we didn't try hard to make out to understand them, they'd just take us into bad luck, 'stead of keeping us out of it. The lot of towheads was troubles we was going to get into with quarrelsome people and all kinds of mean folks. If we minded our business and didn't talk back and aggravate them, we would pull through and get out of the fog and into the big clear river, which was the Free States, and wouldn't have no trouble. It had clouded up pretty dark just after I got onto the raft, but it was clearing up again now. Oh well, that's all interpreted well enough as far as it goes, Jim, I says, but what does these things stand for? It was the leaves and rubbish on the raft, in the smashed door. You could see them first rate now. Jim looked at the trash, and then looked at me, and back at the trash again. He had got the dream fixed so strong in his head that he couldn't seem to shake it loose and get the facts back into its place again right away. But when he did get the thing straightened around, he looked at me steadily without ever smiling, and says,
What did they stand for? I was going to tell you. When I got all wore out with work and with the calling for you and went to sleep, my heart was most broke because you was lost and I didn't care no more what become of me and the raft. And when I wake up and find you back again all safe and sound, the tears coming, and I could have got down on my knees and kissed your foot. I was so thankful. And all you was thinking was how you could make a fool of old Jim with a lie. That truck dar is trash. And trash is what people is that puts dirt on the head of their friends and makes them ashamed.
Then he got up slow and walked to the wigwam, and went in there without saying anything, but that was enough. It made me feel so mean I could almost kissed his foot to get him to take it back. It was 15 minutes before I could work myself up to go and humble myself to a nigger, but I done it, and I weren't ever sorry for it afterwards neither. I didn't do him no more mean tricks, and I wouldn't 'a' done that one if I'd 'a' known it would make him feel that way. End of chapter 15. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 16. Expectation. A White Lie. Floating Currency. Running by Cairo. Swimming ashore. We slept most all day, and started out at night, a little ways behind a monstrous long raft that was as long going as a procession. She had 4 long sweeps at each end, so we judged she carried as many as 30 men likely. She had 5 big wigwams aboard, wide apart, and an open camp-fire in the middle, and a tall flagpole at each end. There was a power of style about her. It amounted to something being a raftsman on such a craft as that. We went drifting down into a big bend, and the night clouded up and got hot. The river was very wide, and was walled with solid timber on both sides. You couldn't see a break in it hardly ever, or a light. We talked about Cairo, and wondered whether we would know it when we got to it. I said likely we wouldn't, because I had heard say there weren't but about a dozen houses there, and if they didn't happen to have them lit up, how was we going to know we was passing a town? Jim said if two big rivers joined together there, that would show, but I said maybe we might think we was passing the foot of an island and coming into the same old river again. That disturbed Jim, and me too. So the question was, what to do? I said, paddle ashore the first time a light showed, and then tell them pap was behind, coming along with a trading scow, and was a green hand at the business, and wanted to know how far it was to Cairo. Jim thought it was a good idea, so we took a smoke on it, and waited. There weren't nothing to do now but to look out sharp for the town, and not pass it without seeing it. He said he'd be mighty sure to see it, because he'd be a free man the minute he seen it, but if he missed it, he'd be in a slave country again, and no more show for freedom. Every little while he jumps up and says,
"Dar she is."
but it weren't. It was jack-o'-lanterns, or lightning bugs, so we set down again, and went to watching, same as before. Jim said it made him all over trembly and feverish to be so close to freedom. Well, I can tell you it made me all over trembly and feverish too to hear him, because I had begun to get it through my head that he was most free. And who was to blame for it? Why, me. I couldn't get that out of my conscience. Not how, nor no way. It got to troubling me so I couldn't rest. I couldn't stay still in one place. It hadn't never come home to me before, what this thing was that I was doing. But now it did, and it stayed with me, and scorched me more and more. I tried to make out to myself that I weren't to blame, because I didn't run Jim off from his rightful owner, but it weren't no use. Conscience up and says every time, "But you knowed he was running for his freedom, and you could have paddled ashore and told somebody." That was so. I couldn't get around that no way. That was where it pinched. Conscience says to me, what had poor Miss Watson done to you, that you could see her nigger go off right under your eyes, and never say one single word? What did that poor old woman do to you, that you could treat her so mean? Why, she tried to learn you your book. She tried to learn you your manners. She tried to be good to you every way she knowed how. That's what she done. I got to feeling so mean and so miserable I most wished I was dead. I fidgeted up and down the raft, abusing myself to myself, and Jim was fidgeting up and down past me. We neither of us could keep still. Every time he danced around and says,
"Dar's Cairo."
it went through me like a shot, and I thought if it was Cairo, I reckoned I would die of miserableness. Jim talked out loud all the time, while I was talking to myself. He was saying how the first thing he would do, when he got to a free state, he would go to saving up money, and never spend a single cent, and when he got enough, he would buy his wife, which was owned on a farm close to where Miss Watson lived, and then they would both work to buy the two children, and if their master wouldn't sell them, they'd get an abolitionist to go and steal them. It most froze me to hear such talk. He would never dared to talk such talk in his life before. Just see what a difference it made in him the minute he judged he was about free. It was according to the old saying, give a nigger an inch and he'll take an ell. Thinks I, this was what comes of my not thinking. Here was this nigger, which I had as good as helped to run away, coming right out flat-footed, and saying he would steal his children, children that belonged to a man I didn't even know, a man that hadn't ever done me no harm. I was sorry to hear Jim say that. It was such a lowering of him. My conscience got to stirring me up hotter than ever, until at last I says to it, let up on me. It ain't too late yet. I'll paddle ashore at the first light and tell. I felt easy and happy, and light as a feather right off. All my troubles was gone. I went to looking out sharp for a light, and sort of singing to myself. By and by, one showed. Jim sings out,
"We safe, Huck, we safe. Jump up and crack your heels. That's the good old Cairo at last. I just knows it."
I says, I'll take the canoe and go and see Jim. It mightn't be, you know. He jumped and got the canoe ready, and put his old coat in the bottom for me to sit on, and give me a paddle, and as I shoved off he says,
"Purty soon I'll be a shouting for joy, and I'll say it's all on account o' Huck. I's a free man, and I couldn't ever been free ef it hadn't been for Huck. Huck done it. Jim won't ever forgit you, Huck. You's the best friend Jim's ever had, and you's the only friend old Jim's got now."
I was paddling off, all in a sweat, to tell on him, but when he says this, it seemed to kind of take the tuck all out of me. I went along slow then, and I weren't right down certain whether I was glad I started or whether I weren't. When I was 50 yards off, Jim says,
"Dar you goes, the old true Huck, the only white gentleman dat ever kep' his promise to old Jim."
Well, I just felt sick, but I says, I got to do it. I can't get out of it. Right then along comes a skiff with 2 men in it with guns, and they stopped and I stopped. One of them says,
"What's that yonder?"
"A piece of a raft," I says.
"Do you belong on it?
"Yes, sir."
Any men on it?"
"Only one, sir."
"Well, there's 5 niggers run off tonight up yonder, above the head of the bend. Is your man white or black?"
I didn't answer up prompt. I tried to, but the words wouldn't come. I tried for a second or two to brace up and out with it, but I weren't man enough, hadn't the spunk of a rabbit. I see I was weakening, so I just give up trying, and up and says, "He's white."
"I reckon we'll go see for ourselves."
"I wish you would," says I, "because it's pap that's there, and maybe you'd help me tow the raft ashore where the light is. He's sick, and so is Mam and Mary Ann."
"Oh, the devil. We're in a hurry, boy, but I suppose we've got to. Come, buckle to your paddle and let's get along."
I buckled to my paddle, and they laid to their oars. When we had made a stroke or two, I says, "Pap'll be mighty much obleeged to you, I can tell you. Everybody goes away when I want them to help me tow the raft ashore, and I can't do it myself."
"Well, that's infernal mean. Odd, too. Say, boy, what's the matter with your father?"
"It's well, it ain't anything much." They stopped pulling. It weren't but a mighty little ways to the raft now. One says,
"Boy, that's a lie. What is the matter with your pap? Answer up square now, and it'll be the better for you."
"Will, sir, I will, honest, but don't leave us, please. It's the gentleman. If you'll only pull ahead and let me heave you the headline, you won't have to come near the raft, please do,"
"Set her back, John, set her back."
says one. They backed water.
"Keep away, boy, keep to leeward. Confound it, I just expect the wind has blowed it to us. Your pap's got the smallpox, and you know it precious well. Why didn't you come out and say so? Do you want to spread it all over?"
"Well," says I, blubbering, "I've told everybody before, and they just went away and left us."
"Poor devil, there's something in that. We are right down sorry for you, but well, hang it, we don't want the smallpox, you see. Look here, I'll tell you what to do. Don't you try to land by yourself, or you'll smash everything to pieces. You float along down about 20 miles, and you'll come to a town on the left-hand side of the river. It will be long after sunup then, and when you ask for help, you tell them your folks are all down with chills and fever. Don't be a fool again and let people guess what is the matter. Now, we're trying to do you a kindness, so you just put 20 miles between us. That's a good boy. It wouldn't do any good to land yonder where the light is. It's only a wood yard. Say, I reckon your father's poor, and I'm bound to say he's in pretty hard luck. Here, I'll put a $20 gold piece on this board, and you get it when it floats by. I feel mighty mean to leave you, but my kingdom, it won't do to fool with smallpox. Don't you see?
Hold on, Parker.
says the other man.
Here's the 20 to put on the board for me. Goodbye, boy. You do as Mr. Parker told you, and you'll be all right.
That's so, my boy. Goodbye. Goodbye. If you see any runaway niggers, you get help and nab them, and you can make some money by it.
Goodbye, sir, says I. I won't let no runaway niggers get by me if I can help it. They went off, and I got aboard the raft, feeling bad and low, because I knowed very well I had done wrong, and I see it weren't no use for me to try to learn to do right. A body that don't get started right when he's little ain't got no show. When the pinch comes, there ain't nothing to back him up and keep him to his work, and so he gets beat. Then I thought a minute, and says to myself, hold on, suppose you'd a done right and give Jim up, would you felt better than what you do now? No, says I, I'd feel bad. I'd feel just the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use you learning to do right when it's troublesome to do right and ain't no trouble to do wrong, and the wages is just the same? I was stuck. I couldn't answer that, so I reckoned I wouldn't bother no more about it, but after this, always do whichever come handiest at the time. I went into the wigwam. Jim wasn't there. I looked all around. He wasn't anywhere. I says, Jim.
Here I is, Huck. Is they out of sight yet? Don't talk loud.
He was in the river, under the stern oar, with just his nose out. I told him they were out of sight, so he come aboard. He says,
I was listening to all the talk, and I slips into the river and was going to shove for shore if they come aboard. Then I was going to swim to the raft again when they was gone. But lawsy, how you did fool 'em, Huck. That was the smartest dodge. I tell you, child, I spec it save old Jim. Old Jim ain't going to forget you for that, honey.
Then we talked about the money. It was a pretty good raise, $20 apiece. Jim said we could take deck passage on a steamboat now, and the money would last us as far as we wanted to go in the Free States. He said 20 mile more weren't far for the raft to go, but he wished we was already there. Towards daybreak we tied up, and Jim was mighty particular about hiding the raft good. Then he worked all day, fixing things in bundles, and getting all ready to quit rafting. That night, about 10, we hove in sight of the lights of a town away down in a left-hand bend. I went off in the canoe to ask about it. Pretty soon I found a man out in the river with a skiff, setting a trot line. I ranged up and says, Mister, is that town Cairo?
Cairo. No? You must be a blame fool.
What town is it, mister?
If you want to know, go and find out. If you stay here bothering around me for about half a minute longer, you'll get something you won't want.
I paddled to the raft. Jim was awful disappointed, but I said never mind, Cairo would be the next place I reckoned. We passed another town before daylight, and it was going out again, but it was high ground, so I didn't go. No high ground about Cairo, Jim said. I had forgot it. We laid up for the day on a towhead, tolerable close to the left-hand bank. I began to suspicion something. So did Jim. I says, maybe we went by Cairo in the fog that night. He says,
Don't let's talk about it, Huck. Po' niggers can't have no luck. I allus expected that rattlesnake skin wa'n't done with its work.
I wish I'd never seen that snake skin, Jim. I do wish I'd never laid eyes on it.
It ain't your fault, Huck. You didn't know. Don't you blame yourself about it.
When it was daylight, here was the clear Ohio water and shore, sure enough, and outside was the old regular muddy, so it was all up with Cairo. We talked it all over, It wouldn't do to take to the shore. We couldn't take the raft up the stream, of course. There weren't no way but to wait for dark, and start back in the canoe and take the chances. So we slept all day amongst the cottonwood thicket, so as to be fresh for the work, and when we went back to the raft about dark, the canoe was gone. We didn't say a word for a good while. There weren't anything to say. We both knowed well enough it was some more work of the rattlesnake skin, so what was the use to talk about it? It would only look like we was finding fault, and that would be bound to fetch more bad luck, and keep it on fetching it too, till we knowed enough to keep still. By and by we talked about what we better do, and found there weren't no way but just to go along down with the raft till we got a chance to buy a canoe to go back in. We weren't going to borrow it when there weren't anybody around, the way Pop would do, for that might set people after us. So we shoved out after dark on the raft. Anybody that don't believe yet that it's foolishness to handle a snakeskin after all that snakeskin done for us, will believe it now if they read on and see what more it done for us. The place to buy canoes is off rafts lying up at shore, but we didn't see no rafts lying up, so we went along during 3 hours and more. Well, the night got gray and rather thick, which is the next meanest thing to fog. You can't tell the shape of the river, and you can't see no distance. It got to be very late and still, and then along comes a steamboat up the river. We lit the lantern, and judged she would see it. Upstream boats didn't generally come too close to us. They go out and follow the bars and hunt for easy water under the reefs, but nights like this they bowl right up the channel against the whole river. We could hear her pounding along, but we didn't see her good till she was close. She aimed right for us. Often they do that, and try to see how close they can come without touching. Sometimes the wheel bites off a sweep, and when the pilot sticks his head out and laughs, and he thinks he's mighty smart. Well, here she comes, and we said she was going to try to shave us, but she didn't seem to be sheering off a bit. She was a big one, and she was coming in a hurry too, looking like a black cloud with rows of glowworms around it. But all of a sudden she bulged out, big and scary, with a long row of wide-open furnace doors shining like red-hot teeth, and her monstrous bows and guards hanging right over us. There was a yell at us, and a jingling of bells to stop the engines, a pow-wow of cussing, and whistling of steam, and as Jim went overboard on one side and I on the other, she come smashing straight through the raft. I dived, and I aimed to find the bottom too, for a 30-foot wheel had got to go over me, and I wanted it to have plenty of room. I could always stay under water a minute. This time I reckoned I stayed under a minute and a half. Then I bounced for the top in a hurry, for I was nearly busting. I popped out to my armpits and blowed the water out of my nose, and puffed a bit. Of course there was a booming current, and of course that boat started her engines again 10 seconds after she stopped them, for they never cared much for raftsmen, so now she was churning along up the river, out of sight in the thick weather, though I could hear her. I sung out for Jim about a dozen times, but I didn't get any answer, so I grabbed a plank that touched me while I was treading water, and struck out for shore, shoving it ahead of me, but I made out to see that the drift of the current was towards the left-hand shore, which meant that I was in a crossing, so I changed off and went that way. It was one of those long slanting 2-mile crossings, so I was a good long time in getting over. I made a safe landing, and clumb up the bank. I couldn't see but a little ways, but I went poking along over rough ground for a quarter of a mile or more, and then I run across a big old-fashioned double-log house before I noticed it. I was going to rush by and get away, but a lot of dogs jumped out and went to howling and barking at me, and I knowed better than to move another peg. End of chapter 16. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 17. An Evening Call. The Farm in Arkansas. Interior Decorations. Stephen doling bots. Poetical effusions. In about a minute somebody spoke out of a window without putting his head out and says,
"Be done, boys? Who's there?"
I says, "It's me,
"Who's me?"
George Jackson, sir."
"What do you want?"
"I don't want nothing, sir. I only want to go along by, but the dogs won't let me."
"What are you prowling around here this time of night for, hey?"
"I weren't prowling about, sir. I fell overboard off of the steamboat."
"Oh, you did you? Strike a light there, somebody. What did you say your name was?"
"George Jackson, sir. I'm only a boy."
"Look here. If you're telling the truth, you needn't be afraid. Nobody'll hurt you. But don't try to budge. Stand right where you are. Rouse out Bob and Tom, some of you, and fetch the guns. George Jackson, is there anyone with you?"
"No, sir, nobody. I heard the people stirring about in the house now, and see a light." The man sung out.
"Snatch that light away, Betsy, you old fool. Ain't you got any sense? Put it on the floor behind the door. Bob, if you and Tom are ready, take your places."
"All ready."
"Now, George Jackson, do you know the Shepherdsons?"
"No, sir. I never heard of them."
"Well, that may be so, and it mayn't. Now, all ready? Step forward, George Jackson, and mind, don't you hurry. Come mighty slow. If there's anyone with you, let him keep back. If he shows himself, he'll be shot. Come along now. Come slow. Push the door open yourself. Just enough to squeeze in. D'ye hear?"
I didn't hurry. I couldn't if I'd a wanted to. I took one slow step at a time, and there weren't a sound, only I thought I couldn't hear my heart. The dogs were as still as the humans, but they followed a little behind me. When I got to the 3 log doorsteps, I heard them unlocking and unbarring and unbolting. I put my hand on the door and pushed it a little and a little more, till somebody said,
"There, that's enough. Put your head in."
I done it, but I judged they would take it off. The candle was on the floor, and there they all was, looking at me, and me at them, for about a quarter of a minute. 3 big men with guns pointed at me, which made me wince, I tell you. The oldest, gray and about 60, the other 2 30 or more, all of them fine and handsome, and the sweetest old gray-headed lady, and back of her 2 young women which I couldn't see right well. The old gentleman says,
"There. I reckon it's all right. Come in."
As soon as I was in, the old gentleman he locked the door and barred it and bolted it, and told the young men to come in with their guns, and they all went in a big parlor that had a new rag carpet on the floor, and got together in a corner that was out of the range of the front windows. There weren't none on the side. They held the candle, and took a good look at me, and all said,
"Why, he ain't a Shepherdson."
"No, there ain't any Shepherdson about him."
Then the old man said he hoped I wouldn't mind being searched for arms, because he didn't mean no harm by it. It was only to make sure. So he didn't pry into my pockets, but only felt outside with his hands, and said it was all right. He told me to take myself easy, and at home, and tell all about myself, but the old lady says,
"Why, bless you, Sol, the poor thing's as wet as he can be, and don't you reckon it may be he's hungry?"
"True for you, Rachel. I forgot."
So the old lady says,
"Betsy,
this was a nigger woman,
you fly round and get him something to eat as quick as you can, poor thing, and one of you girls go and wake up Buck and tell him, oh, here he is himself, Buck, take this little stranger and get the wet clothes off from him and dress him up in something of yours that's dry.
Buck looked about as old as me, 13 or 14 or along there, though he was a little bigger than me. He hadn't on anything but a shirt, and he was very drowsy-headed. He came in, gaping and digging one fist into his eyes, and he was dragging a gun along with the other one. He says,
"Ain't they no Shepherdsons around?"
They said no, 'twas a false alarm.
"Well,"
He says,
"they'd a been some. I reckon I'd a got one."
They all laughed, and Bob says,
Why, Buck, they might have scalped us all, you've been so slow in coming.
"Well, nobody come after me. It ain't right. I'm always kept down. I don't get no show."
Never mind, Buck, my boy.
says the old man.
You'll have show enough, all in good time. Don't you fret about it. Go along with you now, and do as your mother told you.
When we got upstairs to his room, he got me a coarse shirt and a roundabout and pants of his, and I put them on. While I was at it, he asked me what my name was, but before I could tell him, he started to tell me about a blue jay and a young rabbit he had catched in the woods, day before yesterday, and he asked me where Moses was when the candle went out. I said I didn't know. I hadn't heard about it before, no way.
"Well, guess,"
He says. How am I going to guess, says I, when I never heard tell of it before?
"But you can guess, can't you? It's just as easy."
Which candle? I says.
"Why, any candle."
He says. I don't know where he was, says I. Where was he?
"Why, he was in the dark. That's where he was."
Well, if you knowed where he was, what did you ask me for?
"Why, blame it. It's a riddle, don't you see? Say, how long are you gonna stay here? You gotta stay always. We can just have booming times. They don't have no school now. Do you own a dog? I've got a dog, and he'll go in the river and bring out chips that you throw in. Do you like to come up on Sundays? And all that kind of foolishness? Bet I don't, but Ma, she makes me. Confound these old breeches. I reckon I better put 'em on, but I'd rather not. It's so warm. Are you all ready? All right, come along, old hoss."
Cold corn pone, cold corned beef, butter and buttermilk. That is what they had for me down there, and there ain't nothing better that ever I've come across yet. Buck and his ma and all of them smoked cob pipes, except the nigger woman, which was gone, and the two young women. They all smoked and talked, and I eat and talked. The young women had quilts about them, and their hair down their backs. They all asked me questions, and I told them how pap and me and all the family was living on a little farm down at the bottom of Arkansas, and my sister Mary Ann run off and got married and never was heard of no more, and Bill went to hunt them and he weren't heard of no more, and Tom and Mort died, and then there weren't nobody but just me and pap left, and he was just trimmed down to nothing on account of his troubles. So when he died, I took what there was left, because the farm didn't belong to us, and started up the river deck passage, and fell overboard, and that was how I come to be here. So they said I could have a home there as long as I wanted it. Then it was most daylight, and everybody went to bed, and I went to bed with Buck, and when I waked up in the morning, daft it all, I had forgot what my name was. So I laid there about an hour trying to think, and when Buck waked up I says, Can you spell, Buck?
"Yes?"
He says, I bet you can't spell my name, says I.
"I bet you what you dare I can."
Says he. All right, says I, go ahead.
Georgejackson. There now.
He says, Well, says I, you done it, but I didn't think you could. It ain't no slouch of a name to spell right off without studying. I set it down, private, because somebody might want me to spell it next, and so I wanted to be handy with it and rattle it off like I was used to it. It was a mighty nice family, and a mighty nice house, too. I hadn't seen no house out in the country before that was so nice, and had so much style. It didn't have an iron latch on the front door, nor a wooden one, but a buckskin string, but a brass knob to turn, the same as houses in town. There weren't no bed in the parlor, nor a sign of a bed. But heaps of parlors in towns has beds in them. There was a big fireplace that was bricked on the bottom, and the bricks was kept clean and red by pouring water on them and scrubbing them with another brick. Sometimes they washed them over with red water paint that they called Spanish brown, same as they do in town. They had big brass dog irons that could hold up a saw log. There was a clock on the middle of the mantelpiece, with a picture of a town painted on the bottom half of the glass front, and a round place in the middle of it for the sun, and you could see the pendulum swinging behind it. It was beautiful to hear that clock tick, and sometimes, when one of these peddlers had been along and scoured her up and got her in good shape, she would start in and strike 150 before she got tuckered out. They wouldn't took any money for her. Well, there was a big outlandish parrot on each side of the clock, which made out something like chalk, and painted up gaudy. By one of the parrots was a cat made of cockery, and a cockery dog by the other, and when you pressed down on them they squeaked, but didn't open their mouths nor look different nor interested. They squeaked through underneath. There was a couple of big wild turkey wing fans spread out behind those things. On the table in the middle of the room was a kind of a lovely cockery basket that had apples and oranges and peaches and grapes piled up in it, which was much redder and yellower and prettier than the real ones is, but they weren't real because you could see where pieces had been chipped off and showed the white chalk, or whatever it was, underneath. This table had a cover made out of a beautiful oilcloth, with a red and blue spread eagle painted on it, and a painted border all around. It come all the way from Philadelphia, they said. There was some books, too, piled up perfectly exact, on each corner of the table. One was a big family Bible full of pictures. One was Pilgrim's Progress, about a man that left his family. It didn't say why. I read considerable in it now and then. The statements was interesting, but tough. Another was Friendship's Offering, full of beautiful stuff and poetry, but I didn't read the poetry. Another was Henry Clay's Speeches, and another was Dr. Gunn's Family Medicine, which told you all about what to do if a body was sick or dead. There was a hymn book, and a lot of other books. And there was nice split-bottom chairs, and perfectly sound, too, not bagged down in the middle and busted, like an old basket. They had pictures hung on the walls, mainly Washingtons and Lafayettes, and battles and Highland Marys, and one called Signing the Declaration. There was some that they called crayons, which one of the daughters which was dead made her own self when she was only 15 years old. They was different from any pictures I ever seen before, blacker mostly. That is common. One was a woman in a slim black dress, belted small under the armpits, with bulges like a cabbage in the middle of the sleeves, and a large black scoop shovel bonnet with a black veil, and white slim ankles crossed about with black tape, and very wee black slippers like a chisel, and she was leaning pensive on a tombstone on her right elbow, under a weeping willow, and her other hand hanging down her side, holding a white handkerchief and a recticle, and underneath the picture it said, "Shall I never see thee more, lass?" Another one was a young lady with her hair all combed up straight to the top of her head, and knotted there in front of a comb, like a chair back, and she was crying into a handkerchief, and had a dead bird laying on its back in her other hand with its heels up, and underneath the picture it said, "I shall never hear thy sweet chirp more, alas." There was one where a young lady was at a window looking up at the moon, and tears running down her cheeks. and she had an open letter in one hand with a black sealing wax showing on one edge of it, and she was mashing a locket with a chain to it against her mouth, and underneath the picture it said, "And art thou gone? Yes, thou art gone, alas." These were all nice pictures, I reckon, but I didn't somehow seem to take to them, because if ever I was down a little, they always give me the fantods. Everybody was sorry she died, because she had laid out a lot more of these pictures to do, and a body could see by what she had done what they had lost. But I reckon that with her disposition she was having a better time in the graveyard. She was at work on what they said was her greatest picture when she took sick, and every day and every night it was her prayer to be allowed to live till she got it done, but she never got the chance. It was a picture of a young woman in a long white gown, standing on the rail of a bridge all ready to jump off, with her hair all down her back, and looking up to the moon, with the tears running down her face, and she had two arms folded across her breast, and two arms stretched out in front, and two more reaching up towards the moon, and the idea was to see which pair would look best, and then scratch out the other arms, but as I was saying, she died before she got her mind made up, and now they kept this picture over the head of the bed in her room, and every time her birthday come they hung flowers on it. Other times it was hid with a little curtain. The young woman in the picture had a kind of a nice sweet face, but there was so many arms it made her look too spidery, seemed to me. This young girl kept a scrapbook when she was alive, and used to paste obituaries and accidents and cases of patient suffering in it out of the Presbyterian Observer, and write poetry after them out of her own head. It was very good poetry. This is what she wrote about a boy by the name of Stephen Dowling Bots that fell down a well and was drowned.
Ode to Stephen Dowling Bots, deceased. And did young Stephen sicken? And did young Stephen die? And did the sad hearts thicken? And did the mourners cry? No, such was not the fate of young Stephen Dowling Bots. Though sad hearts round him thickened, 'twas not from sickness shots. No whooping cough did rack his frame, nor measles drear with spots. Not these impaired the sacred name of Stephen Dowling Bots. Despised love struck not with woe that head of curly knots, nor stomach troubles laid him low, young Stephen Dowling Bots. Oh no, then list with tearful eye, whilst I his fate do tell. His soul did from this cold world fly by falling down a well. They got him out and emptied him, alas, it was too late! His spirit was gone for to sport aloft in the realms of the good and great.
If Emmeline Granford could make poetry like that before she was 14, there ain't no telling what she could 'a' done by and by. Buck said she could rattle off poetry like nothing. She didn't ever have to stop to think. He said she would slap down a line, and if she couldn't find anything to rhyme with it, would just scratch it out and slap down another one, and go ahead. She weren't particular. She could write about anything you choose to give to her to write about just so it was sadful. Every time a man died, or a woman died, or a child died, she would be on hand with her tribute before he was cold. She called them tributes. The neighbor said it was the doctor first, then Emmeline, then the undertaker. The undertaker never got in ahead of Emmeline but once, and then she hung fire on a rhyme for the dead person's name, which was Whistler. She weren't ever the same after that. She never complained, but she kinder pined away and did not live long. Poor thing, many's the time I made myself go up to the little room that used to be hers and get out her poor scrapbook and read in it, when her pictures had been aggravating me, and I had soured on her a little. I liked all that family, dead ones and all, and weren't going to let anything come between us. Poor Emmeline made poetry about all the dead people when she was alive. and it didn't seem right that there weren't nobody to make some about her now she was gone. So I tried to sweat out a verse or two myself, but I couldn't seem to make it go somehow. They kept Emmeline's room trim and nice, and all the things fixed in it, just the way she liked to have them when she was alive, and nobody ever slept there. The old lady took care of the room herself, though there was plenty of niggers, and she sewed there a good deal, and read her Bible there mostly. Well, as I was saying about the parlour, there was beautiful curtains on the windows, white with pictures painted on them of castles with vines all down the walls, and cattle coming down to drink. There was a little old piano, too, that had 10 pans in it, I reckon, and nothing was ever so lovely as to hear the young ladies sing "The Last Link is Broken" and play "The Battle of Prague" on it. The walls of all the rooms was plastered, and most had carpets on the floors, and the whole house was whitewashed on the outside. It was a double house, and the big open place betwixt them was roofed and floored, and sometimes the table was set there in the middle of the day, and it was a cool, comfortable place. Nothing couldn't be better, and weren't the cooking good, and just bushels of it too. End of chapter 17. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Chapter 18. Colonel Grangerford. Aristocracy. Feuds. The Testament. Recovering the Raft. The Woodpile. Pork and Cabbage. Colonel Grangerford was a gentleman, you see. He was a gentleman all over, and so was his family. He was well born, as the saying is, and that's worth as much in a man as it is in a horse, so the widow Douglas said, and nobody ever denied that she was of the first aristocracy in our town. And Pop, he always said it too, though he weren't no more quality than a mud-cat himself. Colonel Grangerford was very tall and very slim, and had a darkish paly complexion, not a sign of red in it anywheres. He was clean shaved every morning all over his thin face, and he had the thinnest kind of lips, and the thinnest kind of nostrils, and a high nose, and heavy eyebrows, and the blackest kind of eyes sunk so deep back that they seemed like they was looking out of caverns at you, as you may say. His forehead was high, and his hair was black and straight and hung to his shoulders. His hands was long and thin, and every day of his life he put on a clean shirt and a full suit from head to foot, made out of linen, so white it hurt your eyes to look at it. And on Sundays he wore a blue tail coat with brass buttons on it. He carried a mahogany cane with a silver head to it. There weren't no frivolousness about him, not a bit, and he weren't ever loud. He was as kind as he could be. You could feel that, you know, and so you had confidence. Sometimes he smiled, and it was good to see. But when he straightened himself up like a liberty pole, and the lightning begun to flicker out from under his eyebrows, you wanted to climb a tree first, and find out what the matter was afterwards. He didn't ever have to tell anybody to mind their manners. Everybody was always good-mannered where he was. Everybody loved to have him around, too. He was sunshine most always. I mean, he made it seem like good weather. When he turned into a cloud bank, it was awful dark for half a minute, and that was enough. There wouldn't nothing go wrong again for a week. When him and the old lady come down in the morning, all the family got up out of their chairs and give them good day, and didn't sit down again till they had sat down. Then Tom and Bob went to the sideboard where the decanter was, and mixed a glass of bitters and handed it to him, and he held it in his hand and waited till Tom's and Bob's was mixed, and then they bowed and said,
Our duty to you, sir and madam.
And they bowed the least bit in the world and said thank you, and so they drank, all three, and Bob and Tom poured a spoonful of water on the sugar, and the mite of whiskey or apple brandy in the bottom of their tumblers, and give it to me and Buck, and we drank to the old people too. Bob was the oldest, and Tom next, tall, beautiful men, with very broad shoulders and brown faces, and long black hair and black eyes. They dressed in white linen from head to foot, like the old gentleman, and wore broad Panama hats. Then there was Miss Charlotte. She was 25, and tall and proud and grand, but as good as she could be when she weren't stirred up. But when she was, she had a look that would make you wilt in your tracks like her father. She was beautiful. So was her sister, Miss Sophia, but it was a different kind. She was gentle and sweet, like a dove, and she was only 20. Each person had their own nigger to wait on them, Buck too. My nigger had a monstrous easy time, because I weren't used to having anybody do anything for me. But Buck's was on the jump most of the time. This was all there was of the family now, but there used to be more. 3 sons, they got killed, and Emmeline that died. The old gentleman owned a lot of farms, and over 100 niggers. Sometimes a stack of people would come there, horseback, from 10 or 15 mile around, and stay 5 or 6 days, and have such junketings around about and on the river, and dances and picnics in the woods daytimes, and the balls at the house nights. These people was mostly kinfolks of the family. The men brought their guns with them. It was a handsome lot of quality, I tell you. There was another clan of aristocracy around there, 5 or 6 families, mostly of the name of Shepherdson. They was as high-toned and well-born and rich and grand as the tribe of Grangerfords. The Shepherdsons and the Grangerfords used the same steamboat landing, which was about 2 mile above our house. So sometimes when I went up there with a lot of our folks, I used to see a lot of the Shepherdsons there on their fine horses. One day Buck and me was away out in the woods hunting, and heard a horse coming. We was crossing the road. Buck says,
"Quick, jump for the woods."
We done it, and then peeped down the woods through the leaves. Pretty soon a splendid young man came galloping down the road, setting his horse easy and looking like a soldier. He had his gun across his pommel. I had seen him before. It was young Harney Shepherdson. I heard Buck's gun go off at my ear, and Harney's hat tumbled off of his head. He grabbed his gun and rode straight to the place where we was hid. But we didn't wait. We started through the woods on a run. The woods weren't thick, so I looked over my shoulder to dodge the bullet, and twice I seen Harney cover Buck with his gun, and then he rode away the way he come, to get his hat, I reckon, but I couldn't see. We never stopped running till we got home. The old gentleman's eyes blazed a minute. 'Twas pleasure mainly, I judged. Then his face sort of smoothed down, and he says, kind of gentle,
I don't like that shooting from behind a bush. Why don't you step into the road, my boy?
The Shepherdsons don't, father. They always take advantage.
Miss Charlotte, she had her head up like a queen while Buck was telling his tale, and her nostrils spread and her eyes snapped. The 2 young men looked dark, but never said nothing. Miss Sophia turned pale, but the color come back when she found the man wasn't hurt. Soon as I could get Buck down by the corn cribs under the trees by ourselves, I says, "Did you want to kill him, Buck?"
Well, I bet I did.
"What did he do to you?"
Him? He's never done nothing to me.
"Well, then, what did you want to kill him for?"
Why, nothing. Only it's on the count of the feud.
"What's a feud?"
Why, where was you raised? Don't you know what a feud is?"
"Never heard of it before. Tell me about it,"
"Well,"
says Buck.
"a feud is this way. Man has a quarrel with another man, and kills him. And that other man's brother kills him, and then the other brothers on both sides goes for one another. Then the cousins chip in. and by everyone's killed off, and there ain't no more feud. But it's kind of slow and takes a long time.
Has this one been going on long, Buck?
Well, I should reckon it started 30 year ago or summers along there. There was trouble about something, and then a lawsuit to settle it, and then the suit went again, one of the men, and so he up and shot the man who won the suit, which he would naturally do, of course. Anyone would.
What was the trouble about, Buck? Land?
I reckon maybe. I don't know.
Well, who done the shootin'? Was it a Grangerford or a Shepherdson?
Laws? How do I know? So long ago.
Don't anybody know?
Oh yes, Pa knows, I reckon, and some of the other old people, but they don't know what this row was about in the first place.
Has there been many killed, Buck?
Yes, right smart chance of funerals, but they don't always kill. Pa's got a few buckshot in him, but he don't mind it 'cause he don't weigh much anyway. Pa's been carved up some with a bowie, and Tom's been hurt once or twice.
Has anybody been killed this year, Buck?
Yes, we got one and they got one. About 3 months ago, my cousin Bud, 14-year-old, was riding through the woods on the other side of the river, and didn't have no weapon with him, which was blame foolish. In a lonesome place, he hears a horse coming behind him, and sees old Baldy Shepherdson a-linking after him with his gun in his hand and his white hair a-flying in the wind. Instead of jumping off and taking to the brush, Bud allowed he could outrun him. So they had it, nip and tuck for 5 miles or more, the old man a-gaining all the time. So at last Bud seen it weren't any use, so he stopped and faced around, so as to have the bullet holes in the front, and the old man he rode up and shot him down, but he didn't get much chance to enjoy his luck, for inside of a week our folks laid him out.
I reckon that old man was a coward, Buck.
I reckon he warn't a coward, not by a blame sight. There ain't a coward amongst them Shepherdsons, not a one, and there ain't no cowards amongst the Grangerfords either. Why, that old man kept up his end in a fight one day for half an hour against 3 Grangerfords. Came out winner. They was all a horse pack, and he lit off his horse and got behind a little wood pile and kept his horse for him, stopped the bullets, but the Grangerfords stayed on their horses and capered around the old man, peppered away at him. He peppered away at them. Him and his horse both went home pretty leaky and crippled. The Grangerfords had to be fetched home, and one of them was dead. The other died the next day. No, sir, the body's out hunting for cowards. He don't want to fool away any time amongst them Shepherdsons, because they don't breed any of that kind.
Next Sunday, we all went to church, about 3 mile, everybody a horseback. The men took their guns along, so did Buck, and kept them between their knees or stood them handy against the wall. The Shepherdsons done the same. It was pretty ornery preachin', all about brotherly love and such like tiresomeness, but everybody said it was a good sermon, and they all talked it over going home, and had such a powerful lot to say about faith and good works and free grace and pre-foreordination, and I don't know what all, but it did seem to me to be one of the roughest Sundays I had run across yet. About an hour after dinner, everybody was dozing around, some in their chairs and some in their rooms, and it got to be pretty dull. Buck and a dog was stretched out on the grass in the sun sound asleep. I went up to our room, and I judged I would take a nap myself. I found that sweet Miss Sophia standing in her door, which was next to ours, and she took me in her room and shut the door very soft, and asked me if I liked her, and I said I did, and she asked me if I would do something for her, and not tell anybody. I said I would. Then she said she'd forget her Testament, and left it in the seat at church between 2 other books, and would I slip out quiet and go there and fetch it for her, and not say nothing to nobody. I said I would. So I slipped out and slipped off up the road, and there weren't anybody at the church, except maybe a hog or two, for there weren't any lock on the door, and hogs likes a punchin' floor in summertime because it's cool. If you notice, most folks don't go to church only when they've got to, but a hog, it's different. Says I to myself, something's up. It ain't natural for a girl to be in such a sweat about a testament. So I give it a shake, and out drops a little piece of paper, with 2:30 wrote on it with a pencil. I ransacked it, but couldn't find anything else. I couldn't make anything out of that, so I put the paper in the book again, and when I got home and upstairs there was Miss Sophia in her door waiting for me. She pulled me in and shut the door. Then she took in the Testament till she found the paper, and as soon as she read it she looked glad, and before a body could think, she grabbed me and give me a squeeze, and said I was the best boy in the world, and not to tell anybody. She was mighty red in the face for a minute, and her eyes lighted up, and it made her powerful pretty. I was a good deal astonished, but when I got my breath, I asked her what the paper was about, and she asked me if I had read it, and I said no, and she asked me if I could read writing, and I told her no, only coarse hand. And then she said the paper weren't anything but a bookmark to keep her place, and I might go and play now. I went off down to the river, studying over this thing, and pretty soon I noticed that my nigger was following along behind. When he was out of sight of the house, he looked back and around a second, and then comes a running, and says,
Mars Judge, if you'll come down into the swamp, I'll show you a whole stack of water moccasins.
Thinks I, that's mighty curious. He said that yesterday. He oughter know a body don't love water moccasins enough to go around hunting for them. What is he up to anyway? So I says, all right, trot ahead. I followed a half a mile. Then he stuck out over the swamp, and he waded ankle deep as much as another half mile. We come to a little flat piece of land, which was dry and very thick, with trees and bushes and vines, and he says,
You shove right in there just a few steps, Mars Judge. Dar's what dey is. I seed 'em before. I don't care to see 'em no more.
Then he slopped right along and went away, and pretty soon the trees hid him. I poked into the place a ways, and come to a little open patch, as big as a bedroom all hung around with vines, and found a man lying there asleep, and, by jigs, it was my old Jim! I waked him up, and I reckoned it was going to be a grand surprise to him to see me again, but it weren't. He nearly cried, he was so glad, but he weren't surprised. Said he swum along behind me that night, and heard me yell every time, but doesn't answer, because he didn't want nobody to pick him up and take him into slavery again. Says he,
I got hurt a little and couldn't swim fast, so I was a considerable ways behind you, de lass. When you landed, I reckoned I could catch up with you on the land, 'bout having to shout at you, but when I see that house, I begin to go slow. I is off too fur to hear what they say to you. I was afraid of the dogs, but when I is all quiet again, I knowed you's in the house, so I struck out for the woods and to wait for day. Early in the morning, some of the niggers come along, going to the fields, and they tuck me and showed me this place, where the dogs can't track me on accounts of the water, and they brings me truck to eat every night and tells me how you's getting along.
Why didn't you tell my Jack to fetch me here sooner, Jim?
Well, 'twa'n't no use to disturb you, Huck, till we could do something, but we's all right now. I've been a-buying pots and pans and victuals, as I got a chancet, and a-patching up the raft nights when—
What raft, Jim?
Our old raft.
You mean to say our old raft weren't smashed all to flinders?
No, she wa'n't. She were tore up a good deal. One end of her was, But there warn't no great harm done, only our traps was most all lost. If we hadn't dived so deep and swum so fur under water, and the night hadn't been so dark, and we warn't so scared, and been such pumpkin heads, as the sayin' is, we'd a seed the raft. But it's just as well we didn't, 'case now she's all fixed up again, most as good as new, and we's got a new lot of stuff in the place of what was lost.
Why, how did you get hold of the raft again, Jim? Did you catch her?
How I going to catch her, and I out in the woods? No, some of the niggers found her, catched on a snag along here in the bend, and they hid her in a crick mongst the willers, and they was so much jawin' 'bout which she belonged to the most that I come to hear about it purty soon. So I ups and settles the trouble by tellin' 'em she don't belong to none of 'em but to you and me. And I asked 'em if they goin' to grab a young white gentleman's property and git a hidin' for it. Then I gin 'em 10 cents apiece, and they is purty well satisfied, and wished some more rafts 'd come along and make 'em rich again. They's mighty good to me, decent niggers is. Whatever I wants 'em to do for me, I don't have to ask 'em twice, honey. Dat Jack's a good nigger, and purty smart.
Yes, he is. He ain't ever told me you was here. Told me to come, and how'd he'd show me a lot of water moccasins. If anything happens, he ain't mixed up in it. He can say he never seen us together, and it'll be the truth. I don't want to talk much about the next day. I reckoned I'll cut it pretty short. I waked up about dawn, and was a-goin' to turn over and go to sleep again when I noticed how still it was. Didn't seem to be anybody stirring. That weren't usual. Next, I noticed that Buck was up and gone. Well, I gets up, a-wondering, and goes downstairs. Nobody around. Everything was still as a mouse. Just the same outside. Thinks I, what does it mean? Down by the woodpile I comes across my Jack and says, "What's all it about?" Says he,
"Don't you know, Mars Judge?"
"No," says I don't."
"Well, then, Miss Sophia's run off, 'deed she has. She run off in de night, sometime, nobody don't know jes when. Run off to git married to dat young Harney Shepherdson, you know. Leastways, so dey spec. De fambly found out 'bout half an hour ago, maybe a little more, and I tell you dey warn't no time lost. Sich another hurryin' up guns and hosses you never see. De women folks is gone for to stir up de relations, and ole Miss Saul and de boys tuck dey guns and rode up de river road for to try to ketch dat young man and kill him 'fore he kin get across de river with Miss Sophia. I reck they gwine to be mighty rough times."
Buck went off without waking me up.
"Well, I reck they did. They don't gwine to mix you up in it. Mars Buck he loaded up his gun and 'lowed he's gwine to fetch home a Shepherdson or bust. Well, there'll be plenty of 'em thar, I reckon, and you bet he'll fetch one ef he gets a chancet."
I took up the river road as hard as I could put. By and by I began to hear guns a good ways off. When I come in sight of the log store and the wood pile where the steamboats lands, I worked along under the trees and brush till I got to a good place, and then I clumb up into the forks of a cottonwood that was out of reach and watched. There was a wood rank 4 foot high a little ways in front of the tree, and first I was going to hide behind that, but maybe it was luckier I didn't. There was 4 or 5 men cavorting around on their horses in the open place before the log store, cussing and yelling, and trying to get at a couple of young chaps that was behind the wood rank alongside of the steamboat landing. But they couldn't come it. Every time one of them showed himself on the riverside of the woodpile, he got shot at. The two boys was squatting back to back behind the woodpile, so they could watch both ways. By and by, the men stopped cavorting around and yelling. They started riding towards the store. Then up gets one of the boys, draws a steady bead over the wood rank, and drops one of them out of his saddle. All of the men jump off their horses, and grab the hurt one, and started to carry him to the store, and that minute the two boys started to run. They got halfway to the tree I was in before the men noticed. Then the men see them, and jumped on their horses and took off after them. They gained on the boys, but it didn't do no good. The boys had too good a start. They got to the woodpile that was in front of my tree, and slipped in behind it, and so they had the bulge on the men again. One of the boys was Buck, and the other was a slim young chap about 19 years old. The men ripped around a while, and then rode away. As soon as they was out of sight, I sung out to Buck, and told him. He didn't know what to make of my voice coming out of the tree, at first. He was awful surprised. He told me to watch out sharp, and let him know when the men comes in sight again. Said they was up to some devilment or another. Wouldn't be gone long. I wished I was out of that tree, but I doesn't come down. Buck began to cry and rip, and lowed that him and his cousin Joe, that was the other young chap, would make up for this day yet. He said his father and his two brothers was killed, and 2 or 3 of the enemy. Said the Shepherdsons laid for them in ambush. Buck said his father and brothers ought to be waited for their relations. The Shepherdsons was too strong for them. I asked him what was become of young Harney and Miss Sophia. They said they got across the river and was safe. I was glad of that, but the way Buck did take on, because he didn't manage to kill Harney that day he shot at him, I ain't ever heard anything like it. All of a sudden, bang, 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 goes 3 or 4 guns. The men had slipped around through the woods and come in from behind without their horses. The boys jumped for the river, both of them hurt, and as they swum down the current the men run along the bank, shooting at them and singing out,
"Kill them! Kill them!"
It made me so sick I most fell out of a tree. I ain't a-going to tell all that happened. It would make me sick again, if I was to do that. I wished I hadn't ever come ashore that night to see such things. I ain't ever going to get shut of them. Lots of times I dreamed about them. I stayed in the tree till it began to get dark, afraid to come down. Sometimes I heard guns away off in the woods, and twice I seen little gangs of men gallop past the log store with guns, so I reckon the trouble was still a-going on. I was mighty downhearted, so I made up my mind I wouldn't ever go a-near that house again, because I reckoned I was to blame, somehow. I judged that that piece of paper meant that Miss Sophia was to meet Harney somewheres at 2:30 and run off, and I judged I ought to told her father about that paper, and the curious way she acted, and then maybe he would a locked her up, and this awful mess wouldn't ever happened. When I got down out of the tree, I crept along down the river bank a piece, and found the 2 bodies laying in the edge of the water, and tugged at them till I got them ashore. Then I covered up their faces, and got away as quick as I could. I cried a little when I was covering up Buck's face, for he was mighty good to me. It was just dark now. I never went near the house, but struck through the woods and made for the swamp. Jim warn't on his island, so I tramped off in a hurry for the crick, and crowded through the willows, red hot to jump aboard and get out of that awful country. The raft was gone, my souls, but I was scared. I couldn't get my breath for most a minute. Then I raised a yell. A voice not 25 foot from me says,
"Good land, is that you, honey? Don't make no noise."
It was Jim's voice. Nothing ever sounded so good before. I run along the bank a piece and got aboard, and Jim, he grabbed me and hugged me. He was so glad to see me. He says,
Laws bless you, child. I's right down sure you's dead again. Jack's been here. He say he's reckon you's been shot, case you didn't come home no more. So I's just dis minute a-startin' to raft down toward the mouth of the crick, so's to be all ready for to shove out and leave soon as Jack comes again and tells me for certain you is dead. Lawsy, I's mighty glad to get you back again, honey.
I says, all right, that's mighty good. They won't find me, and they'll think I've been killed and floated down the river. There's something up there that'll help them think so. So don't you lose no time, Jim, but just shove off for the big water as fast as ever you can. I never felt easy till the raft was 2 miles below there and out in the middle of the Mississippi. Then we hung up our signal lantern and judged that we was free and safe once more. I hadn't had a bite to eat since yesterday, so Jim, he got out some corn dodgers and buttermilk, and pork and cabbage and greens. There ain't nothing in the world so good when it's cooked right, and whilst I eat my supper, we talked and had a good time. I was powerful glad to get away from the feuds, and so was Jim to get away from the swamp. He said there weren't no home like a raft after all. Other places do seem so cramped up and smothery, but a raft don't. You feel mighty free and easy and comfortable on a raft. End of chapter 18.